There is always a third person at the dinner table. You cannot see them, but you feel their presence in the space between your mother's words and the rice cooling on your plate. They sit in the pause before your father speaks, in the way his eyes drift past you toward some distant point of comparison. This invisible guest has a name that changes with every conversation. Cousin Min, the neighbor's daughter, that boy from the gifted class, but their function remains constant. They are the mirror held up to show you everything you are not. The fluorescent light hums above the table. Your mother places another piece of chicken on your plate, and in the same breath, without transition or warning, she says it. Why can't you be more like Nam? Same age, but he already got into the science competition. The words land soft but heavy, like snow accumulating on a roof, until the structure begins to crack. You keep chewing. You have learned that the appropriate response is silence, that defending yourself only prolongs the comparison, makes it more detailed, more specific, more cutting. What they do not see, what you yourself barely recognize, is the gradual disappearance happening inside you. When your parents look at you, their eyes pass through your actual face to land on the face they wish you had. You are not a child. You are a draft, a prototype, a version marked insufficient and sent back for revision. And the child they truly want, the one with perfect scores, with trophies lining the shelves, with the kind of success that makes relatives nod approvingly at New Year's gatherings, that child exists somewhere else, living a life you are supposed to be jealous enough to replicate. The comparison creates a strange geometry in your mind. You learn to measure yourself, not by your own growth, but by the distance between you and others. When you score 90 points, the question is not, did I improve, but how many people scored higher? When you achieve something, the celebration lasts exactly as long as it takes for someone to mention another child who achieved more. The finish line moves. It always moves. You run faster, study longer, sacrifice more, and still the voice arrives. That's good, but have you seen what they're doing? They call it motivation. They believe they are lighting a fire under you, pushing you toward excellence, preparing you for a competitive world. What they are actually doing is teaching you that love is a trophy to be won through performance, that your worth is not inherent but conditional, that being yourself is not enough. You must become someone else to deserve their pride. The bitterness you feel toward other people's children is not envy in its petty form. This is important to understand. When people, even you yourself, judge this feeling as jealousy, as smallness of spirit, they misname it. What you carry is not hatred of those other children. What you carry is grief, deep untended grief, for the unconditional acceptance you never received. When your mother praises someone else's child, what you hear beneath the words is, I wish you were them. I wish you were anyone but you. You do not know what you like. This realization arrives later, often in early adulthood, when someone asks you a simple question: what music do you enjoy? What hobbies bring you pleasure? What kind of life you want to build? And you discover you have no answer. You know what impresses people. You know what earns approval. You have spent so many years studying the preferences of others that your own preferences never had room to develop. You are fluent in the language of achievement, but illiterate in the language of desire. Perfectionism grows in the soil of comparison like poison ivy. You believe with the desperate logic of a child trying to solve an unsolvable problem that if you become flawless, the comparisons will stop. If you eliminate every weakness, every failure, every human limitation, then finally they will look at you and see only you, not you, measured against someone else. But perfection is a horizon. You walk toward it, and it walks away from you at the exact same pace. The gap never closes. The criticism never stops. At 99 points, they ask why not 100. At 100, they ask why you did not finish faster. The voice that once came from outside, from your mother's mouth, your father's disappointed eyes, the neighbor's casual comments, slowly migrates inward. This is the cruelest transformation. You internalize the comparison. Now you do not need anyone to tell you that you are insufficient. You open social media and perform the comparison yourself. You see someone's vacation photos and feel not joy at their happiness, but shame at your own lack. You hear about a peer's promotion and experience it not as inspiration but as proof of your failure. You have become the prosecutor in your own trial, the critic in your own mind, the parent who never stops measuring. The child who was always compared grows into an adult who cannot stop comparing. But here is what they never told you, what you need to hear above the noise of judgment. The comparison was never about you. It was about them, about their fears, their unfulfilled dreams, their own childhood wounds. And understanding this, truly understanding this, is the first crack in the wall that has imprisoned you. To understand why comparison cuts so deep, you must first understand the mechanism by which it operates. In psychology, there is a term for what happens when two people cannot address their conflict directly, so they pull a third party into the space between them to create pressure. It is called triangulation. Picture a triangle. At one point stands the parent, at another stands you, and at the third point stands the phantom, the other child, the idealized version, the standard you cannot meet. The parent does not say, "I am anxious about your future," or "I am afraid you will suffer as I did." Instead, they gesture toward the third point and say, "Why can't you be like them?" This triangle serves a function. It allows the parent to avoid direct emotional confrontation. It deflects their fear and anxiety onto an external comparison rather than acknowledging their own internal turmoil. And for you, the child trapped in this geometric prison, it means that every conversation about your life, your choices, your worth, includes an invisible witness. You are never alone with your parent. There is always someone else in the room, someone better, and their presence turns every interaction into a competition you did not agree to enter. The cruelty of triangulation is that it makes honesty impossible. When your mother says, "Look at how well Mai is doing," what she might actually mean is, "I am terrified that you will not survive in this harsh world, and I do not know how to protect you except by pushing you harder." But that vulnerability never surfaces. Instead, the words arrive as comparison, as criticism, and you receive them as judgment. The real conversation about fear, about love, about the unbearable weight of watching your child navigate a difficult life never happens. In its place, there is only the endless measurement against others. Many parents, though they would never admit it aloud, view their children as extensions of themselves, not as separate beings with distinct souls and purposes, but as branches growing from their own trunk. In psychological terms, this is narcissistic extension. The child becomes a decoration, an achievement worn like jewelry to display at gatherings. When you excel, they shine. When you stumble, they feel the shame as if they themselves have fallen. Your report card is not a measure of your learning, but a referendum on their parenting. Your success at the piano recital is not your moment, but theirs, to claim at the next family reunion. This is why the comparison cuts in both directions. When they compare you unfavorably to another child, they are not simply criticizing you. They are expressing their own sense of failure. They are saying without the words, "I am losing the competition of parenthood." Other parents are winning. Their children are proof of their worth, and you are proof that I have failed. The comparison is a projection. They are taking their own inadequacy, their own childhood wounds of being compared and found wanting, and casting it onto you like a shadow that grows longer as the sun sets. Consider the mechanics of how this works. Your father was once a boy who dreamed of becoming an engineer, but circumstances, poverty, war obligation, forced him into a different life. That dream did not die. It merely hibernated, waiting for a new body to inhabit, and then you were born. In you, he saw a second chance. Your life became the canvas on which he would paint the masterpiece he never got to create. When he compares you to the neighbor's son, who got into the top university, he is not seeing two children. He is seeing his own lost opportunity slipping away again. He is fighting a ghost of his past, and you have become collateral damage in that ancient war. This extends beyond individual families into the culture itself. There is a worldview embedded in the comparison, a fundamental belief about how reality operates. It is the scarcity mindset. The belief that success is a finite pie, that achievement is a limited resource, that for one person to win, another must lose. In this framework, the world is not abundant but scarce. There are only so many seats at the good universities, only so many prestigious jobs, only so many chances at a comfortable life. Therefore, your child must fight, must claw, must be better than everyone else, or they will be left behind in poverty and suffering. The scarcity mindset creates a zero-sum game. If your classmate scores higher, they have taken something from you. If your cousin gets the scholarship, that is one less scholarship available for you. Every other person's success is perceived as a threat to your survival. This is why parents compare. They genuinely believe they are teaching you a survival skill. They think they are training you to be competitive, to be alert, to understand that the world is a battlefield and you must be armed. But what this actually teaches is something far more destructive. It teaches you to view other human beings as adversaries. It teaches you that connection is competition. It teaches you that there is no space for collaboration, for shared joy, for celebrating someone else's achievement without feeling diminished by it. The scarcity mindset turns the entire world into an arena where everyone is fighting everyone else, and the prize for winning is simply the temporary relief of not being the one who lost. In Asian cultures, particularly, there is an additional layer, the concept of face of social standing, of how the family is perceived by the community. Your achievements are not private, they are public currency. When relatives gather for New Year, when neighbors chat in the market, when parents meet at school functions, there is an invisible scoreboard being updated in real time. Whose child got into medical school? Whose daughter married well? Whose son bought a house? The comparison is not just about you, it is about the family's position in the social hierarchy. Your failure is not your private burden, it is the family's public shame. This creates an impossible pressure. You are not responsible only for your own life, but for the honor of your entire lineage. When you do not measure up, you are not simply disappointing your parents. You are humiliating them before their peers, their siblings, their own parents. The comparison becomes multi-generational. Your grandmother compared your mother to her cousins. Your mother, carrying that wound, now compares you. And if you have children, the cycle threatens to continue, each generation passing down the trauma like a cursed inheritance. The most insidious part of this process is how it migrates from external to internal. At first, the comparison comes from outside. Your mother's voice, your father's disappointed sigh, the aunt who asks at every gathering why you have not achieved what her son has achieved. These external voices are painful, but they are at least identifiable. You know where the attack is coming from. You can, in theory, walk away, close the door, limit contact, but then something shifts. The voice that once belonged to your mother begins to sound like your own thoughts. You internalize the critic. You absorb the comparison mechanism so completely that you no longer need anyone else to perform it. Now, lying in bed at night, scrolling through social media, you do it to yourself. You see a former classmate's wedding photos and immediately calculate they found love before you did, which means you are behind, which means you are failing. You read about someone's promotion and feel not inspiration but inadequacy. The comparison has become automatic, reflexive, constant. This internalized critic is exhausting because it never rests. External criticism has gaps. Your parents go to sleep, your relatives go home, your teachers take holidays. But the voice in your own head has no off switch. It runs on a loop, narrating your life as a series of insufficiencies. You cannot enjoy a meal without comparing your body to others. You cannot celebrate an achievement without immediately thinking of someone who achieved more. You cannot rest without guilt, because rest means you are not competing, and if you are not competing, you are losing. The internalized critic speaks in your parents' voice, but uses your own mouth. It knows all your weak points because it lives inside you. It knows exactly what to say to make you feel small, worthless, perpetually inadequate. And because it sounds like your own thoughts, you believe it. You think, this is just reality. I am being objective. I am simply acknowledging the truth that I am not good enough. You do not recognize it as the voice of trauma, as the echo of 1,000 comparisons that have carved grooves into your neural pathways. What makes this particularly cruel is that even when you succeed, when you finally achieve the thing that was supposed to prove your worth, it brings no peace. You get into the good university, and instead of relief, you feel the immediate pressure to perform well there. You get the promotion, and instead of celebration, you wonder why you did not get it sooner. You buy the house, and instead of satisfaction, you notice it is smaller than your colleague's house. The goalpost moves because the real problem was never your achievement level. The real problem is that your worth was made conditional in the first place. You were taught that love is something you earn through performance. That acceptance is a reward given for meeting standards. That you must constantly prove your right to exist, to take up space, to be valued. And no achievement can ever satisfy that equation because the equation itself is broken. You are trying to solve for a variable that does not exist in the formula. Here is the truth they never told you, the revelation that can begin to set you free. The child you were compared to does not exist. Not in the way you have been imagining. Other people's children is not a person. It is a collage, a composite sketch assembled from fragments of different lives. Your mother takes the academic achievement of one child, the musical talent of another, the obedience of a third, the athletic ability of a fourth, and stitches them together into a single, impossible standard. She creates a fiction, a mythological creature, and then asks why you cannot become it. No human being possesses all these qualities simultaneously. The boy who excels at mathematics might be failing at emotional connection. The girl with the piano trophies might be suffocating under the weight of her own perfectionism. The cousin, who seems to glide through life with ease, might be hiding depression behind practiced smiles. But your parents do not see the full picture. They see only the highlight reel, the curated success, the public achievement, and they hold this edited compilation up as the standard against which your entire complex, messy, fully human existence must be measured. You have been running a race against a ghost. You have been trying to defeat a competitor who does not have a body, who does not need sleep, who does not experience doubt or fear or limitation. The comparison is rigged from the start. It is like being asked to compete in swimming against a creature that is part dolphin, part shark, part submarine. The game is designed so that you will always lose, because the standard is not based in reality, but in fantasy. Consider what happens when you finally meet the child you were compared to. You have built them up in your mind as superhuman, as the embodiment of everything you lack. And then you encounter them at a family gathering or a school reunion, and you discover they are ordinary. They have acne, they stumble over their words, they express insecurity about their own life. They mention in passing that their parents constantly compare them to someone else. The pedestal crumbles, the illusion fractures, and you realize you have been tormenting yourself over a projection, a shadow, a story your parents told to manage their own anxiety. But the deeper question remains, even if that other child were as perfect as advertised, why should you become them? The world already has them. The world does not need a second version, a copy, an imitation. What the world lacks is you, the specific, irreplaceable, utterly unique constellation of qualities and quirks and perspectives that exist only in your particular combination. Einstein said you cannot judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, yet this is precisely what comparison does. It takes your natural gifts and declares them worthless because they do not match someone else's natural gifts. You are not supposed to be someone else. This is not a moral platitude or empty encouragement. This is biological fact, psychological truth, existential reality. Your brain is wired differently. Your experiences have carved unique pathways in your neural networks. Your combination of strengths and weaknesses, interests and aversions is yours alone. When you spend your life trying to become someone else, you do not become them. You become a poorly executed copy while abandoning the masterpiece you could have created by being fully yourself. There is a way to transform the pain of comparison into useful information. When you feel envy, that sharp, ugly feeling you have been taught to hide and deny, it is actually speaking to you. Envy is not random. You do not feel envious of every person's every quality. You feel envious of specific things, and those things reveal what you truly value. The key is to listen to the envy without judgment, to treat it as data rather than sin. When you feel envious of someone's freedom to travel, your envy is telling you that you value freedom, that you are craving more autonomy in your life. When you feel envious of someone's creative work, your envy is revealing that you have creative desires you have been suppressing. When you feel envious of someone's relationship, your envy is pointing toward your own loneliness, your own hunger for connection. The envy is a compass. It shows you what direction your soul wants to move, what needs are going unmet, what desires you have been too afraid to acknowledge. But this requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to yourself. You must stop treating yourself as a problem to be solved, a deficiency to be corrected, a failure to be redeemed. You must begin to see yourself as a landscape to be explored, a language to be learned, a story that only you can tell. The question is not, why am I not like them? The question is, what am I like? What lives in me that has never been given permission to emerge? This shift does not happen through willpower or positive thinking. It happens through small, repeated acts of choosing yourself over the comparison. It happens through the daily practice of turning your attention away from others' lives and toward your own. It happens through the courage to disappoint the voices external and internal that demand you be someone you are not. The work of unlearning comparison is not dramatic. It does not happen in a single moment of revelation or through one powerful conversation. It happens in the small, unglamorous decisions you make each day when the old pattern tries to reassert itself. It happens when you feel the pull to measure yourself against someone else, and you choose deliberately to turn your attention elsewhere. The healing is repetition. The healing is practice. The healing is boring and necessary and slow. Begin with the architecture of your daily life. Social media is the largest comparison arena ever constructed in human history. Every time you open the application, you are entering a hall of mirrors where everyone displays their best angle, their highest achievement, their most enviable moment. You see the vacation but not the credit card debt that paid for it. You see the promotion but not the anxiety attacks in the office bathroom. You see the wedding but not the fights that happen after the photographer leaves. You are comparing your full reality, complete with doubt, fatigue, and fear, to their edited highlights. This is not a fair fight. This is not even a real fight. It is self-harm disguised as social connection. The action required is simple but difficult. Unfollow, mute. Remove from your field of vision anyone whose content consistently makes you feel inadequate. This is not cruelty toward them. This is compassion toward yourself. You are not obligated to witness everyone's life. You are not required to consume content that poisons your peace. Your mental space is limited and precious. Guard it the way you would guard your physical home. Do not allow intruders simply because they knock politely. Some part of you will resist this. You will tell yourself you are being weak, that you should be strong enough to see others succeed without feeling diminished. But this is the voice of the internalized critic, the one who learned that your feelings do not matter, that you must endure pain to prove your worth. Protecting yourself is not weakness. It is the first act of self-respect after years of self-abandonment. The deeper work involves separating your worth from your achievement. You were taught that your value is conditional, that you must earn the right to take up space through constant accomplishment. This belief is so embedded that even thinking about challenging it feels dangerous. If your worth is not based on achievement, then what is it based on? The question itself reveals how thoroughly you have been colonized by the comparison mindset. Your worth is inherent. It exists because you exist. You do not earn it through performance any more than a tree earns the right to grow or a river earns the right to flow. You are valuable not because of what you do, but because of what you are, a conscious being capable of experience, of thought, of feeling. Your worth is not a trophy awarded by judges. It is a fact of your existence as fundamental as your heartbeat. Practice saying this to yourself even when you do not believe it. I am worthy of love when I fail. I am worthy of respect when I am resting. I am worthy of kindness when I am doing nothing impressive at all. The words will feel hollow at first. They will feel like lies. This is because you have spent so long believing the opposite. But repetition creates new neural pathways. Each time you speak these words, you are building a small bridge toward a different way of being. If your relationship with your parents allows for honest conversation, there may come a time when you can speak directly about the harm the comparisons have caused. This requires careful preparation. Choose a moment of calm, not a moment of conflict. Use language that focuses on your own experience rather than their intention. When you compare me to others, I feel hurt and inadequate, rather than, you are always criticizing me. The goal is not to make them wrong, but to make yourself heard. But many parents cannot hear this. They are too defended, too invested in their own methods, too wounded by their own childhoods to acknowledge the pain they have caused. If this is your reality, then the work shifts. You must build what might be called an emotional shield. When your mother begins the comparison, when your father sighs in disappointment, you practice an internal response. This is their anxiety, not my inadequacy. This is their fear, not my failure. They are throwing emotional garbage at me, and I do not have to pick it up and carry it. This is not about rejecting your parents or cutting them off. This is about refusing to let their unprocessed trauma become your burden. You can love them and still protect yourself from them. You can honor them and still decline to accept their judgment as truth. The boundary is internal. It is the space between their words and your self-concept, the gap where you remember that their opinion is not the same as reality. Begin to celebrate victories that are invisible to the comparison game. You cooked a meal that nourished you. You had a conversation that felt genuine. You noticed the way afternoon light falls through windows. You finished something not because it was impressive, but because you wanted to complete it. These small acts of living fully in your own experience are revolutionary. They are training your brain to derive satisfaction from internal alignment rather than external validation. There is a garden where roses do not envy sunflowers, where the oak tree does not measure its height against the grass, where each plant blooms in its own season, roots down into its own soil, reaches toward the light at its own pace. This garden understands what human beings have forgotten, that diversity is not competition, that difference is not deficiency, that the world needs both the flower that blooms in spring and the one that waits for autumn. You have spent your life in a different garden, one where every plant was expected to be a rose, where the sunflower was punished for being tall, the violets criticized for being small, the cacti judged for their inability to grow in the same soil as orchids. In that garden, nothing could simply be what it was. Everything had to justify its existence by becoming something else. But you can leave that garden. You can walk away from the soil poisoned by comparison and find new ground. The walking away is not a single journey, but 1,000 small steps, each one taken when you choose your own path over someone else's map. Each time you say no to the voice that measures, no to the impulse to compare, no to the belief that your worth must be proven, you are taking another step toward the garden where you can finally grow as yourself. Theodore Roosevelt said that comparison is the thief of joy, but it steals more than joy. It steals your life. It steals the decades you could have spent developing your actual gifts instead of compensating for your supposed deficiencies. It steals the relationships you could have built if you had not viewed every person as a competitor. It steals your peace, your presence, your ability to simply be here now in this moment without constantly calculating your position relative to everyone else. The invitation is this: stop running the race you never agreed to enter. Put down the trophy you have been desperately reaching for. Let someone else win the competition, because the competition itself is a lie. Your life is not a contest. It is not a performance to be judged or a product to be ranked. It is a singular, unrepeatable expression of consciousness, and it is happening right now whether you are paying attention to it or not. Begin to tend your own garden. Water it with acceptance, not comparison. Let the weeds of envy die from neglect. Plant seeds that reflect your true desires, not your parents' unfulfilled dreams. Some plants will grow quickly, some will take years, some will never flourish, and that is not failure. That is life. That is the messy, imperfect, beautiful work of becoming who you already are, underneath the layers of shame and expectation. You are enough, not because you achieved something, not because you finally measure up to the standard, but because enough is what you have always been. The only person who needed to believe this was you, and perhaps slowly, carefully, with great patience toward yourself, you can begin to believe it now. The comparison ends when you decide it ends. The freedom begins when you choose yourself, and that choice is available to you in every moment, including this one.